Okay, in this video we're going to talk about the order of operations. If you do math in the wrong order, you'll get the wrong answer. So in this example, 3 plus 7 times 5, you could either add the 3 and the 7 first and then multiply that result by 5, or you could multiply the 7 times the 5 first and then add that result to 3. And you will get a different answer. And it's only because mathematicians sat down and agreed on this a long time ago that you're supposed to do the multiplication before the addition in this example. So let's do it both ways and just show that it comes out to be two different numbers. So 3 plus 7, if I do that first, which is incorrect, would give me 10, and then I would multiply it by 5, and 10 times 5 is 50. If I do the multiplication first, which I'm supposed to, I'll end up with 3 plus 35, because 7 times 5 is 35, and when I add those together, I get 38. And indeed, this is the correct answer, and 50 is the incorrect answer, because you're supposed to multiply before you add. So to learn the order of operations, we follow these guidelines. Perform all operations first within grouping symbols. That includes parentheses, brackets, absolute value symbols. So if there's any operation to do inside, like a subtraction problem inside or addition problem inside, you would do that first. Then you'll evaluate all exponential expressions, anything with an exponent in it. So if there's an expression that has a power, an exponent, you're going to want to do that next. And then you're going to do any multiplication or division that's there in the order which they occur from left to right. Okay, so all multiplication and division will happen at the same step, step 3. And then fourth, all additions and subtractions also in the order in which they occur from left to right. So this is a common misunderstanding that if you have something like this, you're supposed to do the addition before the subtraction. That's incorrect. You are indeed supposed to just go from left to right once you're down to additions and subtractions. So in the order in which they occur. So you might have memorized, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which is a little mnemonic that we use to remember the order of operations. But in please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, it's important to know that my dear, or multiplication division, happen at the same step. Okay, those are both together in step 3 in whichever order they occur from left to right. And the same thing with Aunt Sally, addition and subtraction, in whichever order they occur from left to right. So it may be that you subtract before you add. Those occur at the same step. And now we'll do some examples. So here's an example. It's got all of the operations in it, including some exponents. First thing I look for is grouping symbols. I don't see any parentheses, so I can skip that first step. The next thing is exponential expressions, and so I see 2 of those. I have a 6 to the second power, which is 6 times 6. I'm going to bring down the minus 24 because I haven't dealt with it yet. Bring down the division sign. I'm going to evaluate 2 to the second power, which is 4. Bring down the multiplication by 3 and the addition of 1. Next is my aunt, right? My dear, which is multiplication and division. And we do those in whatever order they occur from left to right. So here I have a 24 divided by 4 and then times 3 in that order. So keep the 36 and keep the minus because we haven't dealt with those yet. 24 divided by 4 is going to give us 6 and then 6 times 3. So we take the result from 24 divided by 4, which is 6, and multiply it by 3, which gives us 18 here. And then bring down the plus 1. And then we're left with only additions and subtractions, and we go in order from left to right, whichever order they occur. So 36 minus 18 first, which is going to be 18, and then last 18 plus 1, which is 19. Another example here, we have some grouping symbols. So when it says to do parentheses first in the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, it doesn't mean you do everything that involves parentheses, because sometimes parentheses just mean multiplication, and we know that comes later in the order of operations. The P of please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or the grouping symbol step, means any operations to do inside of grouping symbols. So in this first parentheses, there is nothing to do inside. It's simply a -6. You might be thinking, but it's squared, I should do that. That is an exponent that's outside of the parentheses, and that'll come at the exponential step. It does not come at the first step, which is to do operations inside of grouping symbols. This grouping symbol has an operation inside. It has subtraction in it, and I can do that, and I need to do that first. So the -6 at the beginning, I'm not going to touch it yet. I'm going to do the 5 minus 7, because that's an operation occurring inside of a parentheses. Keep the squared outside of the parentheses because we haven't gone out there yet. And then keep the times -3 at the end. Now I'm at the exponential expressions part, so I'm going to do anything that's exponential. I see a -6 in parentheses squared, which we should remember means -6 times another -6. The base is actually -6 here. When I square that, I get a positive 36. I see another exponent on a -2. So this subtraction sign is still there, but this -2 times itself will give us a positive 4. And then the times -3 is still there at the end. Notice when I evaluated the exponent, I dropped the parentheses because I actually did the exponent. I don't need the parentheses around the -2 anymore. It became a positive 4. All right, now I'm at 36 minus 4 times -3. I have to do multiplication or division next from left to right. I see only a multiplication to do, so I'm going to have a 36. I'm going to keep this subtraction as a subtraction sign. And I'm going to do 4 times -3, which is -12. And then 36 minus -12, that's the subtraction. Last thing to do. It's like 36 plus positive 12, because remember, subtraction is like adding the opposite. And then 48 is the final result. Now, sometimes at this step, there's a little confusion. I'm going to rewrite that. 36 minus 4 times -3. Students like to ask, is that 4 negative or positive? Should I be treating that as a negative or positive? And really, you can think about the minus sign that's in front of it as either a subtraction sign or a negative sign. It's just that you can't think of it as both. So I chose to think of that as a subtraction sign and kept the 4 as a positive 4 when I proceeded. If I chose to think of it as a negative sign, as in this is a -4 or -4, then I would have had to write -4 times -3 as positive 12. And I would have skipped right to the step where it was 36 plus 12. So you just need to be careful when you have a minus sign in front of a number that you're treating it as either a subtraction of that number or a negative sign of that number. But you can't treat it as both, because then you would have had the wrong sign. All right, I would have you guys try this. You may want to pause, try this one on your own. I'll proceed through the answer here. Very much like the example we just did. I have an operation to do inside of parentheses first. That's 10 minus 13, which is -3. Then I have two exponential things to evaluate. -8 squared, which is 64. -3 squared, which is 9. And again, take care with these minus signs. I will keep it as a subtraction. Do 9 times -2, which is -18. Because there's a subtraction sign and a negative sign, I kept the parentheses around that. And now I'm going to change it to the addition of a regular 18. And then 64 plus 18 is going to be 82. Sorry about these. As the final result. Two more notes about the order of operations. 1. Brackets might be used when there are parentheses within parentheses. So if you see square brackets, it just means that there are more parentheses going on inside of them. And brackets are just the same as parentheses. So if I was to do the order of operations here, I would start with any operations inside of the innermost parentheses. So here I have 7 minus 11. Keeping the -3 squared, I'm not going to touch that yet. Keeping this bracket, this 20, and this division sign. And now I'm going to evaluate 7 minus 11, which is -4. I don't need parentheses around it anymore. I just need to close the bracket. I'm still at the grouping symbols step of the order of operations. I have another operation to do inside of a grouping symbol, 20 divided by -4. So notice I've worked from the inside out. -3 squared plus 2. 20 divided by -4 is -5. I can either write it in brackets. I can change those brackets to parentheses now because there's nothing else going on inside of them. Doesn't matter either way. Now I'm ready for the exponents step of the order of operations. This is a -3 squared, as in the 3 squared is the exponential expression. It has an opposite symbol in front of it, a negative sign in front of it. So I'm going to do the 3 squared, which gives me 9, and keep it negative. It's not that the 3 was negative, right? It was that the 3 squared was negative. And then I also have multiplication to do over here, 2 times a -5, which is minus 10 or plus -10, however you choose to think about that. And then -9 minus 10, going over here, is like -9 plus -10. And I know that if I'm at -9 on the number line and I'm adding -10 more, I'm going further in the negative direction to end up at -19. And then two last notes. Absolute value symbols are considered grouping symbols, like I mentioned earlier. And then the top and bottom of fractions, you have to think about them separately as totally separate expressions. You simplify each of them first. The very last thing you're going to do is attempt to reduce the fraction if you ever have a lot of stuff going on inside of a fraction, okay? So you want to do the top and bottom separately from each other. So on the top here, inside of the grouping symbol, I have to do this 2 squared minus 1. 2 squared minus 1 is 4 minus 1, and 4 minus 1 is 3. So I can simplify this top to say 2 minus 3 times the absolute value of 3 over 5 plus 2. Now, I've done the operations inside of the grouping symbols. I don't see any exponential things left to do, so I'm ready to simplify the top using multiplication first. Okay, so the absolute value of 3 is 3, and I have multiplication, 3 times 3. So the top actually says 2 minus 9. The bottom says 5 plus 2. I'm going to continue simplifying the top. 2 minus 9 is negative 7. I can simplify the bottom because 5 plus 2 is 7. So notice I've simplified the top and I simplified the bottom. I did not look up and down yet. Now that the top and the bottom are both simplified as much as they can, now I can attempt to reduce the fraction and see that negative 7 over 7 is negative 1. And that's all.